So I thought maybe a good place to start would be for you guys to introduce yourselves.
Okay, hi. I'm Vic. Should I speak to you or the camera?
You can speak to me, it's fine. Whatever you feel more comfortable with.
Okay.
It's
Feels
fine.
weird introducing myself to you.
Okay, yeah, true, so go ahead.
I'm Vic from Friends of Aldabra. My background, I don't know if I should do background.
But do background.
Yeah.
Tell the story.
Yeah, tell us
I'm
Feels natural.
Vic from Friends of Aldabra. My background is in biomedical science and marine biology. And I started working on this campaign back in October of 2024. So yeah, we've been advocating to stop the current hotel development on Assumption Island for over a year now. And that's been our life for a year. Yeah, I should say I'm Seychelles. Sorry, people don't know that, actually. I'm Victoria from Friends of Aldabra. I am Seychelles. I grew up in Beaux-Arts and I went to French school. The ocean has always been like part of my life. I don't remember a time where I didn't swim or
I love it. It's challenging to have to introduce yourself.
It
to
is.
it. Don't worry about it. We will dig into all of that stuff. But Celina, who are you?
Hi. Hi. I'm Celina. I'm a conservationist and a campaigner for nature. And I grew up in so many different countries around the world. I was born in China, but my mom is Dutch, my dad is Canadian, and then lived in Italy, and like all over the place. So I don't really have a sense of one place being home, which also means that everywhere feels like home. And home has always been in nature, because no one can tell you that you don't belong, and that it's not something that is your shared heritage or responsibility. But my background is in wildlife conservation. So I studied biology and then I did a master's in tropical forest ecology, all at Imperial College in London. So science, but at the same time, I love storytelling, and I got really frustrated with being limited by the tools of science to protect nature. Because science is super important and we need the information and data, but ultimately the way all the decisions are made in our world and the way people and human beings make decisions is based off of our emotions. And data and numbers don't really change our feelings and our opinions, and feelings and movements and other people around us change our opinions and feelings. So I moved into storytelling and became a photographer and photojournalist, and I documented environmental issues all around the world, mostly in the tropics, all focused on the connection between people and nature and how to use storytelling to protect nature. And I had the immense privilege of seeing Assumption and seeing Aldabra as a photographer very briefly. I was on Aldabra for one day. But one day was enough to see that it's the most beautiful place on this planet, under the water and on land. Of all the places I've been and worked and studied and learned about, Aldabra is special. And so when I found out about what was happening on Assumption, and I realized that there was no free, prior, and informed consent, that Seychelles people didn't know what was happening, and that it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, I thought that there must be something that the international community should do, our responsibility to ourselves and to each other, but also in a situation when clearly people weren't able to speak up. And so I asked around and I found you guys. And thank goodness I found you. And since then, the rest is history. I think Friends of Aldabra was created because, yeah, we found each other and found a way to tell this story.
So what's the origin story How did Friends of Aldabra come to be? You broached on it a little bit, but you started it after you came to Seychelles and went to Assomption. Is that right?
Well, I don't think I wouldn't say, oh my God, that's such a beautiful bird.
Yes.
Is that a sunbird?
Colibri!
Petit colibri, little
It's a sunbird.
bird.
It's so beautiful.
I hope the cats don't get it. Baba, stay away. I see her in the shrub.
So I wouldn't actually say that Friends of Aldabra started straight away. I think it took almost 6 months to even figure out what was the best way to start. But it was the first, like before the EIA was even published, that I had the privilege to go to Assumption, and I went as a photographer with an NGO, and I saw what was happening, and I remember asking, the skippers and the people on the island, what's going on here? And they didn't really know. They didn't have the answer, and they said, we're just as shocked as you are. I don't know what's going on. And so came back to Mahe, continued to ask around, continued to ask a few NGOs. They mentioned some scoping meetings and then EIA.
Was this before the scoping meeting took place?
I think it was just after
Okay.
the first scoping meeting.
So if I understand correctly, they had already started construction on the island or clearing. Something had begun.
The airstrip.
Okay, the airstrip.
So when I was there, we saw the hundreds of workers expanding an airstrip, which was just shocking. Cement mixers, bulldozers, those giant machines with the rolly,
the
roll.
cement maker.
Yes, yeah. Oh no, the thing that rolls over. It's just this giant metal wheel.
Yeah.
And saw a huge amount of kind of development, and that was already happening before the public was able to submit scoping forms. And that was happening, and when we asked, we said, why is the airstrip being expanded? Oh, because they want to build a hotel. And so we started asking around, and after I left Seychelles, I continued to dig and send emails and ask other NGOs and ask different stakeholders, who's involved, what's going on here. And this is just my journalism brain worm, needing to ask questions and understand. And I thought, okay, I need to find people in Seychelles that are fighting this, because who am I to come in and say what Seychelles people should be doing with their islands and the Seychelles government should be doing with their islands. But something here seems really wrong. Something here seems unjust. And also it looked like a land grab, essentially. And so in that time, I started putting together what is now the white paper, together with the former science coordinator on Aldabra, who lived on Aldabra for 2 years. So I found somebody who would know the island better than I could ever. I also reached out to the SIF and the SIF board, kind of just notifying them that this is something of great concern. And I reached out to scientists and experts all around the world that have either worked on Aldabra before or who are experts in certain fields. So, for example, Aldabra was just announced as an important marine, an important shark and ray area. So I've got the chair of the IUCN Shark and Ray Specialist Group to have a look at the EIA. And the overwhelming conclusion was it's just not up to standard for a place of such importance. And in that process, started talking about it online. And I think that's how, I just remember receiving a message from you saying, I think that you're doing something about this and we really want to learn more. And I thought, I have found people who are doing something about this. This is amazing. Because before we ever went public, before any of this, we first had to exhaust every opportunity to engage the government, to engage the stakeholders, to see whether they could actually change their minds. kind of going public is really the last resort. And I'm also like, there's none of this happens without Seychelles voices and people here.
Well, firstly, thank you so much for caring about it, because I think we definitely need all the help we can get. We're going to get into the whole EIA process and all of that stuff in a minute. But I just want to ask you, just to rewind, you mentioned land grab, and I think maybe a lot of people don't necessarily know what that means. So can you maybe break down what that means and what it looks like?
Yeah. There's this concept in international law called free, prior, informed consent. And that in order to start a development project, you need, and this is specifically introduced for indigenous peoples and local communities. And this was introduced because there's such a long history of very wealthy companies or governments taking land from indigenous people and local communities. And technically, by the book, everything checks out. But ultimately, what we're really seeing is a manipulation of interests so that a company or a government can maximize their profits and take advantage of the natural resources of that land. So, for example, with indigenous communities in, for example, the Brazilian Amazon, it has happened time and time again with agricultural expansion, huge agricultural interests or mining interests or oil and gas exploration interests coming in, giving local people tons of money, telling them, we're going to bring a project here and you're going to earn lots of money. And local people not necessarily having all the information they need, quite often because it's financial or legal and it's deliberately made murky, then they sign essentially their land away without realizing what they've given up. And it makes it so much harder to fight after the fact. And this concept of free, prior, informed consent was introduced because quite often as well, people are signing these things with a gun held to their head. So free means people have the ability, it's a freedom of choice. They can say no without repercussions. Whether that's the case in most places, it's very questionable. Prior means this decision was presented to them before anything ever began, before construction, before plans. When it comes to investment, it's before the excuse of there's just too much money on the table is even there, this conversation needs to happen. And then informed means that people have all of the necessary information and knowledge and support. So a local community member should have access to a lawyer, should have access to the documents and information, which quite frankly, a lot of the time there isn't, just not provided. And you can't have that expectation that everyone understands all that information either. Just cultural differences, language. People need to be able to have all the information they need to make a real decision. And it's very, very hard. It's called FPIC, right? And it's just clearly not the case here. And quite often, this is how land is taken away from indigenous people, from local communities, and how people are kicked off of their land, and all for huge financial interests.
Thank you. That's very, very insightful
Very
and
long
helpful. No, but it's a great answer. I think it's important to really break things down so that everybody really understands what the interests are here in protecting these islands. And especially coming from someone like you who has been involved in campaigns like this in other countries, to be able to have your expertise to tell us, well, actually, this is pretty standard practice, and maybe we should find another way or challenge these norms. So
Absolutely.
Vic, how did you come to fit into all of this? What's your role? Tell us a little bit about the journey.
So I graduated from my bachelor's last year, and I came back to the Seychelles and worked on a coral restoration project. And when I came home, the people from the scientific conservation community were talking about Assumption Island and about some sort of development on it. So I went online and I found the environmental impact assessment, and I read it, and while reading it, I was just like, this is actually a lot of things that I'm reading just don't add up. I don't understand why we're not addressing the elephant in the room being the proximity of Assumption Island to Aldabra. Why is I essentially thought that not enough emphasis was being put on the effects that a hotel development on Assumption Island would have on Aldabra. So I started reaching out. I started sending emails to people from the local scientific and conservation communities. I started reaching out to, so by reaching out to people in the local conservation and scientific community, the overwhelming response that I was getting back was, yep, we know this is horrible, this is a catastrophe, this is a ticking time bomb, this is a disaster waiting to happen, but there's nothing we can do. So then I started sending hundreds and hundreds of emails to international NGOs and people from the international scientific community. I started by reaching out to people from the university that I went to, so the University of Queensland, asking coral experts, seagrass experts, turtle experts for advice and guidance, because I've never done a campaign before. I just come out of science. And I thought science would save the day. I thought, that's honestly what I thought. I thought all I was asking at that point in time was, can anyone guide me and show me what the procedures would be to get another EIA done for this hotel development before it starts? The elephant in the room was that the organization that wrote the environmental impact assessment had a history and shared board members with the organization that's essentially the contractor for this hotel development, which is a conflict of interest. So at that point, all I was asking was for the scientific community to help me push for an independent environmental impact assessment, because I knew that if that were to happen, a hotel development of this scale and size would never have been able to be approved because of the proximity of Assumption to Aldabra and the biosecurity risk that a hotel like that a tourism infrastructure would entail. Sent hundreds and hundreds of emails, experienced a roller coaster of emotions, going from just despair, losing hope every 2 days, to then getting an answer from Greenpeace Africa and being like, okay, this is actually spiking interest, to eventually meeting you and realizing that, just remembering that the concerns that I had and the fears that I had were not something that I held alone in my heart, and that it was something that was shared by so many people here. And through meeting you, I met Celina, and she shared her findings from the white paper, which essentially just confirmed everything that I thought about the environmental impact assessment. And we worked together on building this online social media campaign that Friends of Aldabra became. And yeah, I think our mission has always been to draw attention to how irreplaceable, how important, scientifically, for biodiversity, not just locally, not just for the Seychelles, but worldwide. Aldabra is so important worldwide, for science, obviously, but just for biodiversity as a whole and for life on Earth as a whole. And obviously, being Seychelles, there's a whole other side of this, which is we've been blessed with this incredible gift. God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, gifted Seychelles people with Aldabra, with Assumption. All of our outer islands are amazing. Mahe is amazing. We're so lucky. But with this comes a huge responsibility, and it's our responsibility as the people who get to live here and live and be immersed in this beauty. It's our responsibility to protect it. It's our responsibility to understand that some places are too important to sell, to lease, to develop, to endanger, essentially. Yeah, that's how we met. That's how Friends of Aldabra came into being.
Thank you for sharing that. Before we get into all the Aldabra and Assomption stuff, I just want to ask you for your experience being a young scientist coming back to Seychelles and looking at this and wanting to get involved and wanting to actually help, because what you're doing here is you're trying to protect our natural heritage, and that is it's for everyone that lives in Seychelles. What was your experience meeting the scientific community, the Seychellois society? How were you met? How were you received?
I think I've gone away to university with always like the idea and the mission to learn as much as I could outside of our country, and then to come back and apply what I had learned home. And just I've never considered working and living really outside of Seychelles. It's always been for Seychelles. Coming home and learning about this hotel development was obviously like alarming and raised a lot of alarm bells, but what was really difficult to move through and what was really confronting was just the lack of, I don't know how to phrase this. It was just the people not feeling like they had a say in what happened to the future of our islands and of our heritage. Seychellois scientists are incredibly qualified, incredibly, like, they know their islands, they know what's at stake. I just think it was really hard to see that a lot of people weren't able to voice their opinions, voice their concerns freely without the fear of facing repercussions. And I think that sort of opened my eyes to a position that I don't want to be in. It breaks my heart to think that you can amass like all of this experience and all of this knowledge and be and not be able to voice what your real scientific opinion is or what you really think should happen to these islands.
It's quite revealing as to the way the system in Seychelles is structured, right? Did you feel that people met you with openness and willingness and support?
I think it was a lot of, we understand your concern, like, on sympathise avec toi, like, we agree, like, it's really bad, but there's nothing we can do. And a lot of, you can go ahead and try and do the things that you want to do, but, like, nothing is going to come from it. So a lot of just, you know, not even really trying, which is really hard. And I mean, again, like, I had just come out of university. I just needed guidance, and I just needed, like, I was never going to be silent on the matter, ever. Whether it got picked up, whether my voice made a difference or not, I was still going to share it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. I mean, and Celina, thank you so much for bringing the campaign to the scale that it has reached. And this is something I think we need to address early on as well, the international aspect of the campaign. So can you maybe speak a little bit on this? Because I know in Seychelles, one of the comments or one of the conceptions that keeps coming up is people being worried that, first of all, Friends of Aldabra is politically motivated, and secondly, that Friends of Aldabra has an international agenda. And I just want to address that right from the beginning. I'll let you guys.
I think I'll start. So let's address the political side of this campaign. Friends of Aldabra has always been and will always be about protecting the interests of protecting the biodiversity of Assumption and by extension of Aldabra. It's never been political, it's got nothing to do with who's in office, it's got nothing to do with who's calling the shots, it's got everything to do with the decisions that are being made in regards to this hotel development and in regards to the future of Assumption and Aldabra. So no matter who's in office, if the decisions that are being made are threatening Assumption Island and threatening Aldabra, then Friends of Aldabra is here to call them out and to bring light on what's at stake. We have been vocal, present, online since November of 2024. So it had nothing to do with the political campaign of September, October 2025. It got picked up a lot during that political campaign, during the Seychelles elections, but Friends of Aldabra is and always has been apolitical. We're not affiliated with any political party. Au contraire, like, it's come at great personal costs. My family, a lot of them are LDS supporters and activists. It's come at a great personal and familial cost to stand by this idea that Assumption and Aldabra have to be protected, no matter who's in office.
I think I'll also just add to that is that we have gone out of our way from the very beginning of the public launch of this campaign. So we launched publicly in November 2024, but we were already working for months before that. And we have gone out of our way to make sure that every statement, every caption, every speech, every single word is not endorsing any one political candidate or party. That is something that was very, something convenient for people to put onto the campaign during the time of the election. But the proof is in the pudding. We were active long before, and we were participating long before. And the role of the activist in society is to hold the line and to hold government accountable. Any government at all. And whether that's this government or a foreign government or the role of the activist is to hold the line. So I think, and I also want to acknowledge the immense personal cost and the amount of courage that it takes for someone here in Seychelles to stand up for what they believe in.
100%.
And the level of retaliation that you receive for doing the right thing and standing up for what you believe in it's terrifying, and I can see why people don't do it. And we're just really grateful that we have our fearless, courageous Vic. Because
Yes.
Ultimately, and people, you can say this about climate change, you can say this about deforestation, you can say this about any environmental issue in the world. It can be twisted into any political narrative. Because politics is how we're trying to solve and face the issue. But nature and the natural world is completely indifferent to politics and completely indifferent to politicians and governments. She's going to do whatever she wants. And everything that we stand for is to protect nature.
And thank God there are people like you to do that, because,
And you.
well, I'm not a scientist or environmentalist, but I want to support people like Vic and also people like you, Celina. And this is where I get confused sometimes, because I see, being in Seychelles in the last 10 years, that we have some major gaps, a lot of holes in our systems and structures and in the due process for development when it comes to nature. And I've also noticed that a lot of organizations, I'm probably going to get cancelled for saying this, but I'm just going to say it anyway, are very passive and don't actually want to rustle feathers. And this is something that really doesn't sit right with me, especially seeing Friends of Aldabra, the campaign, and the fact that it's been incredibly difficult, and I can vouch for this because I've seen you guys since the beginning, it's been incredibly difficult to get support on the ground from the people and the organizations that are meant to and paid to protect our natural heritage. And this is something I want to talk a little bit more about. But tell us a little bit about the state of Assomption and Aldabra now as you see it.
Do you want us to address the international component? Because we just jumped.
Yes,
Yeah, let's
sorry,
do that.
my
No,
bad.
that's
I'm
all good.
getting ahead of myself. Go.
The original question was
To basically just shed a little bit of light on the international dynamic of the campaign, why it's so important that we have the international support, and how the collaboration works, because I think that's what people feel a little bit confused about.
Yeah. Do you want me to take the lead on this? So Aldabra is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and there are also huge world-leading efforts like the Debt for Nature Swap that has amassed international attention and international funding to protect Aldabra and the waters around Assumption, specifically the Marine Spatial Plan. And Seychelles as well, as a country, is reliant on international tourism for a huge amount of its GDP. If hotels and developments are being built to cater to international tourists, and funding from the international space is coming into Seychelles to protect its biodiversity, and the Seychelles biodiversity is world heritage, it's global shared heritage, then there is an interest for the international community, and quite frankly, the responsibility of the international community to step in and provide whatever support the local community needs in order to face the challenges that it faces. And in this case, this is also not a Seychelles-owned development. This is an international investor. This is a foreign investor coming in. And so I think there's also the element of essentially the international community being like calling in the cavalry, right? When local actors, when local actors and local stakeholders have their hands tied, like you mentioned, rightfully so, understandably so. It's such a small country and everybody knows everybody. And by acting against one, you could potentially be really sacrificing and jeopardizing your opportunities, your family's opportunities. That is a situation that I entirely sympathize with, which is also why it can be helpful to have international organizations or international voices come in and kind of share this burden and share and spread that risk and spread, if one person sticks their neck out, they're gonna get their head cut off. But if 20 people stick their neck out, and what we've been able to do is not just 20, not just 100, but 22,000 people stick their neck out, thousands, to do this so that no one person bears all of that consequence. That's kind of the role I see as an international community. And also, quite frankly, Aldabra is something special to so many people around the world.
That's what I was going to say. I think it's been incredibly, not only heartwarming, but so inspiring to see the amount of care that people have for Aldabra, for the future of Assumption and Aldabra. And people that live, in a snowy mountain cabin in Norway. You know what I mean? This place is so special, and people all around the world are able to recognize that. And it makes you feel less alone. It makes the Seychelles feel like people all around the world see what's there, understand its value, and are willing to stand with the people of Seychelles to make sure that we get to protect our natural heritage.
Absolutely, and I might be wrong for saying this or thinking it, but I've come to believe that without the international component, we don't stand a chance, because we're up against Goliath, and these foreign developers, these foreign investors, they have unlimited resources, so we definitely do need support from the international community to make sure things are done ethically and sustainably. That actually just brings me to a point about being anti-development, because that's also something that we're accused of being. Can you speak a little bit on that?
So Friends of Aldabra is anti-large-scale, opaque, non-transparent developments that are done without free, prior, informed consent, and without care and consideration for the biodiversity of Assumption and of Aldabra. Speaking to the scientific community, like in the Seychelles, and scientists that have worked on Aldabra, scientists that have worked on the outer islands, we understand and appreciate the logistical, like, nightmare that conservation on these outer islands can be. And I'm going to be careful with what I say. And presence on Assumption doesn't have to be 37 villas, 4 restaurants, and a horse stable for it to be able to support the research that's going on Aldabra. There are sustainable alternatives. This model of development doesn't fit Assumption Island and doesn't fit the proximity of this island to Aldabra. So we're not, I don't want to say that actually. So we are anti-large-scale, opaque developments.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to add anything on that?
I think the most important thing is that decisions are being made based off of evidence. Science-based, evidence-based decisions, and decisions where Seychellois actually get to have a say. And this is just from an outsider looking in. So I also, you know, who am I to say whether Assumption should be developed or not? All I can say is right now, as Assumption is currently being developed, it's unjust. It is in direct contradiction to the best-in-class science and what world leaders in this field say is what is right. And it's also in direct contradiction to what people want. It is overwhelmingly clear that people don't want to see what's happening to Assumption right now. And the added factor is the amount of mystery. There's so much mystery and so much is hidden. You know, if everything was out in the open, and this is the role of the international community, everything out in the open, shining a light on what's happening, then this would be a very, very different story. But there's a reason why it's not in the light, because it's not right.
Yeah.
Because they're doing something wrong.
And it's actually very interesting because we see this pattern repeating itself in Seychelles, and I've never seen a campaign of this scale in Seychelles before. It's been very eye-opening, and it's also made me realize that there's a lot that we need to, I don't know if fix is the right word, but we need to maybe revise in Seychelles in terms of policies and how we accept these developments, how we develop what we see as progress in Seychelles. So I just want to circle back quickly because you had previously mentioned, I think it was on your BBC interview, you said that Seychellois pretty much donated Aldabra for science and for conservation. And I'd just love to hear you elaborate on that a little bit more.
I'm going to bring up dates, but I'm not sure. Like, they come from Keith. So in 1981, was it 5 years? That's what someone says. After the Seychelles became a republic, the Seychelles donated, donated's a word. The Seychelles gifted Aldabra to humanity because Seychellois people and the Seychelles recognized the value of Aldabra. The value of Aldabra for biodiversity scientifically, and decided to gift it to humanity as opposed to making money from it and exploiting it. I think we need to remember that commitment now that our economy is nowhere near what it was in 1981, it's heartbreaking, and it's a shame that now we're actually willing to put it in danger for a hotel development that's going to cater to a few of the elite people that can afford to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to spend a night in that resort.
And we're often sold this idea that these developments, these large-scale destructive developments, bring revenue to the country and actually bring opportunities to the country and benefit us. Can you elaborate a little bit on how that's not true? Or maybe it is true?
Well, I think Seychelles has a clear model that it has replicated on lots of islands. However, something that we argued from the get-go at the very beginning, and this was something before we ever went public that we shared with the former government, we wanted to bring, let's just have a conversation. Let's see if we can stop this. How can we support you in stopping this before it ever starts? Because, by the way, that's also another amazing thing about this campaign and about Friends of Aldabra. How often do you get to save a place before it's destroyed? Before the forest is set on fire? Before the atmosphere is polluted? And that's the unique opportunity that we had. But in this case, before anything ever started, we asked, is there a feasibility study? Is this development even going to make any money? Who is this development really for? Why do you need 37 villas? Show us the market interest in the 37 villas, which is also why the international component of this was to blow it up online internationally and show the international community doesn't want this. They don't want to pay however much money to spend a night at a hotel that destroyed a World Heritage Site. So I completely understand that one of the most, small island states suffer one of the most challenging governance issues, the balance between development, sovereignty, and conservation. But all we can say here is you're not really getting any of those, unfortunately. And we don't know anything about the financial side of this. It's all kept under the table. And who's going to make the most money out of this? Is it the government, or is it the development company? Or is it, we have no idea. And that's, I think, the resounding kind of takeaway feeling, which is there's just not enough information for people to make that decision for themselves.
I think it's easy. It's easy to say that this hotel development is going to create employment and that it's going to benefit like the everyday Seychellois. But do we even know, for other hotels on the outer islands, do we even know if that's true and if that applies to these hotels? Like, how many Seychellois people are employed on the other hotels in the outer islands? Regardless, is whatever that yields, is it worth losing what's at stake? Mm-hmm. Is it worth endangering Aldabra? Is it worth losing one of the last places in the world that's been dedicated to conservation and science and that hasn't been sold off to the highest bidder yet? There are alternatives. Seychellois people back in 1981 decided that no amount of money was worth Aldabra. What's changed?
And also from Jean Mortimer, from what she was saying, Assomption has the most important green turtle nesting beach in the whole of Seychelles, and is also, I think, the second longest beach in Seychelles, and probably the most beautiful beach in the whole Seychelles. So let's segue into Assomption, because